Okay, what do we see here? Tiger, forest, trees, scary eyes. But when this bits and bytes of information is sent to a brain, it processes it in nanoseconds, and there's just one single emotion which sends out: danger, run. Right? In our businesses, a lot of information is being collected and being presented to us in some shape and form. Normally, something like this. When something like this is thrown at a brain, what do you think we get? Maybe hold on a minute, I need some more time. Right? We overestimate our capacity to process information. We are pretty bad at it. But that's what we are going through in our business every single day. But at the same time, in our personal world, a lot of information is getting captured every single minute, every single time, right? For example, at this point in time, an Apple Watch is perhaps capturing 100,000 data points on me every day. But all of that is coming through in a beautiful, easy, intuitive way to help me meet my health objectives, acting like a health coach and nudging me to lead a healthier lifestyle. That was really the motivation behind starting Cuddle way back in 2016. We said, won't it be nice that each one of us have a data co-pilot at work, someone who would help us make better decisions every single day. So what does that mean? For a business user, it really boils down to questions like this, right? How's my business doing? Which part of my business needs my attention? And what should I do about it, right? Yes, abstracted at a meta level, but those are the questions with which we started thinking about what does a data co-pilot mean. Translating it into specifics, it might be about answering business questions, runs analysis, present insights. But it turned out very quickly that that's not good enough. That's not good enough in today's day and age. What we really need is a system which anticipates business questions. What we really need is a system not just to give answers to our questions, but to present stories. What we need is someone who can nudge all of us into action. And that is what we've been trying to do for the last 3.5 years. And I should admit that we're just getting started at it. Right? We've come a long way, and one thing that while we have quite a few clients whom we are very proud of, one thing that is really heartening to see is perhaps Cuddle is the most engaging, the most adapted tool within the analytics ecosystem. We are obsessed about this because, for whatever reasons, looks like most of the analytics tools are really not bothered whether are they being used at all. And when we look at the statistics, for us, it's in many implementations, it's well above 80%. Right? So what I wanted to do in the next few minutes is really share some of the learnings that we have gathered as to how we have gone about doing this. And as all of you look to transform the way you make decisions at work, some of these might be helpful. So let's get started. At many levels, this is really the journey on which all of us are on, right? Fitbit tells us that you have had 7,442 steps. Put that on a chart, and that becomes a very useful information. Add the context of how you are doing vis-a-vis average and what time of the day it is, that becomes an insight. But the real magic happens when I get a nudge saying, you know what, I think it's time you step out and start running. That's the journey from data to action, is what we are all on in some ways. And this is something that we see at many places, right? Google collates all the traffic data, combines it with what my calendar data, looks at how the travel schedules are, and nudges me saying, hey, you better leave for work right now, otherwise you'll be late to get to catch a flight, right? So when we started looking at the business world, a typical sales manager, sales leader would get everyday report about all the sales by cities, by zones, across product lines. Just imagine every single day I'm getting these reports, and everyone's expecting that, oh, go ahead, take decisions using all of this data. It doesn't work like that. What do? We basically manage by averages. That's what we do, right? So what we did at Cuddle is, what if we start analyzing all the data? Cuddle automatically analyzes the data and tells you, listen, maybe the store number 5, store number 20 is what you need to focus on, because that's running 5% lower than expected. Or better still, you know what? Looks like this particular region is not likely to meet your targets, so you need to do something about it. So those are the nudges that we think translate those insights into actions. So as we built it, what are the learnings that we had? Okay. Hannah mentioned about being sensitive and being specific, right? That's a colorful way of talking about false positives and false negatives. But while all of us are building these alerting systems of making the data come to the user, what we realized is that it's extremely important to understand that for the user, if there are too many false positives, what I would end up doing? I would turn off my notifications, and boom, gone. You now no longer has access to that user. If there are too many false negatives, I would keep my backup system on, which means that this particular decision tool is no longer my primary go-to market. And it's hard to get these balances in place. So when you're building a way to a proactive alerting, proactive nudges system, it's not just about algorithms to find anomalies and patterns in the data and push it to the users, but also figuring out what's really happening, what's really going on with the users, how many of them are false positives, how many of them are false negatives, if you really want the users to engage with them, right? So which brings us to the next bit of learning, which is about all of us speak about, okay, so we need to get the feedback from the users. And we said, fine, get the feedback. Here it is. On Cuddle, you can long press it. You can say, hey, it's relevant, not relevant. Great, right? Works well with the buyers. And they say, fantastic, you have this tool. But you know what? We have very little feedback back from the users. And that's understandable when you think a little deeper about it, right? There is no motivation, there is no incentive to really for the user to go ahead and to push it and to give relevant and not relevant. Just because you have a mechanism to get the feedback doesn't mean that suddenly all the feedback will start coming to us. So we need to think about different ways, creative ways of making sure that we learn the exact nature and the behavior from the users. So just keep that in mind about getting explicit and implicit feedback around these things. And thirdly, which we realized, is that when just imagine yourself being pushed 10 new alerts. Now I am kind of overwhelmed. I don't know what to do, and it creates anxiety for me, right? And that's where you need to take it a step forward and ask yourself, so what? And the system should be able to answer it for you. So that's where closing the loop is important. So for example, this is Cuddle. While it tells you this is what the alert is, it also tells you perhaps what could possibly be the reasons for this alert and where exactly is this sales drop happening in this particular case. So think about what next from a user perspective. Okay, so that's the part about nudges. When you ask Google about Apple, it has to make a decision. Are you talking about Apple the fruit or Apple the apple, right? But magically, when you ask a slightly more specific question, suddenly Google understands, saying, hey, listen, yes, color of apple, that's red, but price of apple, I think you're referring to the Apple phones, and let me give you that information. Now, mind you, color of Apple, the phone, is also perfectly valid scenario. And at the same time, price of apple, the fruit, is also perfectly valid scenario. But Google understands the context behind the question. Who's asking? Where is it being asked for? What's the full question being asked? And applies learning to be able to give the answer so that you can communicate with Google in a natural form, just the way you and I talk. And that's the hard part. That's the crux of it, right? Natural conversations, which is all probabilistic, which is all contextual conversations. So when we were building Cuddle, for example, when you ask Cuddle, what's the sales at Target this month? It says it is at Target, the retailer. I think you're looking for dollar sales, and it is $617,000. But within the same instance of Cuddle, within the same implementation, if I change the question a little bit and say, hey, what's the sales versus Target this month? Everything's changed, right? But now it says it's $6 million versus a $6.2 million of Target. So what we really need to understand is that we are now moving from a deterministic world of SQL queries and machine languages to a probabilistic world of linguistic. Think about it. When in English language, when I ask you a question, the same question could mean completely different things depending on the context in which it is spoken to. But a SQL query, a typical querying language, it's completely deterministic. The question that we need to ask ourselves is that do we want users to overly specify everything that they need to ask for, or to converse with the systems in a more natural manner? And that's the leap that we have to make if we really need to change the way the decision-making and the decision assistant works. A typical English wrapper or a SQL query will just not cut it. We need to inject machine learning right at the heart of the product, and not, once the product's there, slap a machine learning language to say that it's NLP-enabled. That just won't cut it. The other thing which we realized was that how do we invoke Cuddle, right? You've seen Iron Man invoking Jarvis like this, right? That's pretty hard, biologically pretty hard to do it. Voice seems to be convenient. And we were shocked and surprised to see that almost 1/3 of all Google queries are actually voice queries. That's not the number. I don't know how many of you, but I don't search via voice, okay? Although my 10-year-old daughter does. So that's the change that's happening. Gartner predicts that more than 23% of all employee interactions will start happening. It'll take us a while, about 3 years, but that's where the world is going to. So we started thinking about...
Tell me which retailers have distribution greater than 95%.
And I got to admit that when we were building this, I said, come on, this is gimmick. I mean, no one's going to use it. In fact, no one uses it. But the reality is that the systems that we build within our enterprises, it better be future-proof. And when you start thinking about voice and the way voice interacts at a workplace, it is very possible to have a Cuddle or a voice assistant sitting in a meeting room, always listening to our conversations and being available there so that the data and the information is available in the context in which the decisions are being taken. So that's the world that we are imagining. That's the world where the organizations are going to. So as you start think about your enterprise applications, think about new ways in which the users are going to interact with data. I had a free weekend in London, and I looked up Parasite. And this is what Google showed up, right? And I was kind of pleased, because while I was looking for Parasite, it automatically showed up. These are the places where it's running, and the show timing, right? And the map for it. Pretty neat, right? Just think about it. Across our organizations, what we are seeing, across our experiences, we are seeing that our systems are anticipating our questions, anticipating our needs. And that's what is being expected from an enterprise system as well. So for example, when you ask who's my top sales rep on dollar sales, what is the next question that you are likely to ask? We try to predict that and bring it up within the system at the word go. That is what we call as designing for serendipity. That is the surprise element that we require within an enterprise applications if we really need to get people to love them and engage with them. All of this is great, but really the challenges comes when we start talking about real data integration, right? And there again, it is about how much data that we are kind of bringing it together, all the data that's bringing it together. It's always hard, it's always complex, okay? So think about, can we integrate insights without really integrating data? So at Cuddle, we follow what we call as convention over configuration. So as long as something's being called a brand and a brand in two different places, let that be a SQL, the other could be a BigQuery, the system can understand it without really integrating the data. There are ways and means possible to get around this challenge of creating massive and data integration projects which runs forever and forever and forever. So that's something that you must explore, because at the end of the day, all of this is about bringing multiple data streams together. Last, and perhaps the most important learning was that right from the day one, we said that this is an end-user product. We almost ignored buyers in the process. We said that what if we directly work with the users and really figuring out what is it that they want to get out of a Copilot. And that involves both usability testing and user testing, and at the same time really figuring out what are they doing with the platform. It's deep instrumentation to really understand the nuances of how things work. We created what we call as a user journey. What is a day in the life of it looks like? I mean, to give you an example, one of the sales leaders, he said this is what his daily routine is. What is it? First thing I come, I get this report, I spend 20 minutes with this report, and I decide whom to call. Simple. He said, every single day, I do this. Now, those are the insights that come when you fully understand how exactly will something like this fit into the user journeys. And of course, there are very interesting tools that are possible to kind of test it. We invested a lot of time doing it. And what we really realized is that most of the times, people kept asking for more features, and the users really wanted less. Okay, I'll give you an example. It's about collaboration. Why shouldn't we be able to collaborate within a platform like this? And we resisted that exercise for a long time, because we said, really, do we need another communication platform? Aren't emails and Slacks and WhatsApps just fine? Can we figure out a way of not building collaboration within the product, but rather leverage all of it? So really, it's very easy to get things complicated. It's very hard to keep it simple and bare bones. And that's what we've learned, and something that you might want to take forward while you're designing all of this. So that's really what I wanted to share. We believe that over the last 30 years, we've only made incremental changes in the way we consume data. Yes, reports have become interesting slice and dice tools. Slice and dice tools have become dashboards. Dashboards have got a little element of natural language thrown in. But those are all incremental changes. It will take time to change. We need to think completely different. And that's what we're trying to do with Cuddle. Thank you.